The more people know about who you are, what you do, and for whom, the more likely it is that they'll send work your way.
If you can identify a segment, then you can understand their specific pain points and their struggles. And then when you talk to them or send them a cold email, it's not just like, hey, reaching out to see if you need any video production services.
I like to turn word of mouth into a strategy.
One of the things that I know that you're really good at and that you can speak into is how to book dream client, how to get fully booked. It's one of the biggest struggles, as a video business owner, the feast or famine lifestyle that we become accustomed to. And we kind of settle in like, this is just how it's going to be. I'm only going to be able to look for new clients when I deliver my most recent project and I can take a breath, but I'm taking a half breath because I got to start reaching out to clients. I got to, meetings, whatever the things are. And then we book another gig and it's back to like production. And then, it's just like this ebb and flow of like, golly, it's hard to build a sustainable business with that rhythm. So what have you done? What have you found? What can you share with us to maybe do that less and maybe to create some opportunities for some predictability or something, some more sustainability where it doesn't always require us to be doing all of the this?
Sure. And we have how long together?
3 days. Let's go to the Philippines and we'll host a retreat.
But I can definitely give you the big picture overview. But you touched upon it. I feel like there are things to it. It's one of the pieces is how to land dream clients.
Yeah.
Then it's like how to do it consistently. And then the other is like the sustainable, like creating a sustainable business, right? So I believe in, let's think about if you were to hire an architect to build a new home. Would you go on Google or would you ask your friend who just remodeled their house, who you like the house? Like,
Absolutely.
Who's your architect?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy? So just like that example, a lot of people go to their trusted network and be like, hey, I'm looking to get this video done. Who did yours? Or do you know anyone? And did you like the experience? So I like to turn word of mouth into a strategy. It's funny because like with Brian, he's like, you should not rely on word of mouth. And I'm like,
Right.
You shouldn't rely on it in the sense of like, let me sit back on my sofa and wait for the introductions to come my way. You have to be proactive about it. It's quite simple. The more people know about who you are, what you do, and for whom, the more likely it is that they'll send work your way. So we need to work on that. And it's like a 3-factor thing. It's for you to get more consistent word of mouth referrals, you need to consider volume. So how many people know about who you are, what you do, and for whom? And if right now that pool of people is very small, you need to like make a conscious effort of growing it every single day. Then we need to think of depth. So how close are you to those people? Like, do they know, like, and really trust you to send people your way? Or are they just aware that you exist because they met you once and they grabbed your business card at a conference and you're hoping that that's enough for them to remember you a year from now when they come across a good lead? No, you need depth with them. You need to nurture that relationship. You need to keep checking in. You need to keep deepening that relationship so you stay top of mind so that they know, like, and trust you. And so that when they do come across a lead, right? Because in our business, it's not, we need to meet people when they need our service.
Right.
We don't need video every day.
Right.
So I feel like we need to work extra hard to stay top of mind on a lot of people's minds, so that when they do come across the person at the right time that needs video.
I just want to say like that, what you just said there, staying top of mind. It's sort of like, okay, like what do I need to do? I remember 10 years ago, 11 years ago when we launched our corporate brand, we had been doing wedding films and I had created an email list. I don't know what spurred me on to say like, hey, we should have an email list and set on a monthly email. But I did, and I maintained it, and we did pretty well, like staying top of mind. But then we launched this corporate brand, and so many of the weddings that we had done, like, the previous 5 years were for like high-end luxury, like very successful people who own businesses or were executives at like big businesses and or like had tons of family money. So I just said, hey, FYI, we just launched this, Tell Studios. We're doing work with corporations, nonprofits, whatever, telling these stories similar to wedding work, just like, business stories. That day, I got an email from one of our clients, my first year in business. And she said, oh my gosh, we were just in a meeting this morning with my team. She worked at a PR firm. And she said, and somebody said, we need a video. Would you work with us? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So fast forward 11 years later, we are still doing work we did $60,000 of work that year with that client. That was a massive amount of money for us. Like I was used to booking $5,000, $10,000 weddings, and for us to get $60,000 from one client, and that was the first year. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of work from this client because, to your point exactly, right place, right time. I sent this newsletter, and it was that day that she made that connection. And but she knew I filmed her wedding. Like she loved her wedding video, but I wasn't an interface. I wasn't
She had
saying
already forgotten, or
totally.
She didn't know you did that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my gosh. So again, don't want to gloss over that. Super, super important. Okay, continue.
Oh, I love that example. So it's all about like, okay, well, because there's no algorithm, there's no funnel for like, how do we find that person at the right time, like right after they just had that meeting. Right. So the best next thing is to like work on your network. So volume, depth, and then alignment. And so that's where I'd be like, okay, well, if you're looking to go to corporate and all your network is in the wedding industry, that's not in alignment. Now you need to start meeting more people in the corporate world. But of course, your clients all have careers. Yeah. So let's work on knowing the right people, right? So like strategic partnerships, meeting the right people who could bring in clients. So working on those three things. And if you are busy with client work, if you're in the middle of like a project, like a week-long shoot, just carve out 30 minutes, 15 minutes every single morning to let me look at the list of people who I know. Do I need to add more people to that list? If yes, let me like try and do some cold emails or ask my current network to introduce me to people. Like I asked Brian to make a lot of intros, like he introduced me to you and now we're here.
Look at us.
Or do you need to just like reach back out to some people who haven't heard from you for a long time? And on the cold email, actually, we have a bunch of templates, Ryan, like if you want to share with your audience, we give them out for free, but it was inspired by Delia, who's now a very close friend. A year and a bit ago, she wrote me a cold email. And from that cold email asking like, does your agency need copywriters? Essentially, it was much better written than that. And that exact email is in our free email templates. She did the math. And from that one email, between the business that she does with us and the business that we sent her way from our clients, in a year, it was worth like 60,000.
If you were out of, depth, alignment, volume, if you were starting from scratch, you had no list and, like maybe you had done a couple of projects for a couple of different clients, like where would you spend your time? Like where have you netted the most results in like one of those areas or practices?
If I was starting out, I think the best thing to do is get very clear on the type of client you would love to land. Because if you're like, no, I'll just take any client, I'm happy with weddings or brand stories or documentaries, then you don't know where to search. Like you don't even have to get married to like that niche or that client avatar, but just get clear on like who you want as a first client. So if I were starting out and I'd be like, okay, I have no clients, but I really want a restaurant, I would Google how to start a restaurant, how to market your restaurant. And I would start seeing like who has a podcast on it that I could pitch myself as a guest to, who's a business coach that already has an audience of restaurant owners who I could potentially introduce myself to and be like, hey, I'm a brand new freelancer. I might be a little bit more affordable for your clients than the others because I'm just getting started. So I need some work in my portfolios to be able to raise my prices. Like, can I help your clients at all? Can I come give a master class to your coaching program? So yeah, I'd think about what would these restaurant owners be Googling, do the same and start to understand their industry and who they're following and try and get in front of those people.
I love that. That's brilliant because I think what you're doing there is we call it finding a channel partner, somebody that has access to a bunch of our ideal clients. So my encouragement is always like, hey, get plugged into an association or a network group that is like full of your ideal client. But man, like if you have the mindset, and so many of the people I coach and talk to, it's like, I'm afraid to niche down because then I'm going to lose out on opportunities. But to your point, like you can't just like sit back and wait for people to reach out and to hire you. That stuff will happen. Just like naturally, it probably will. Not at the level that you want or need. So you have to do some outbound, you got to do some work. And that means if you can identify a segment, then you can understand their specific pain points and their struggles. And then when you talk to them or send them a cold email, it's not just like, hey, reaching out to see if you need any video production services, hit me up. It's like, that's like so generic and that doesn't resonate. But if you say, hey, I work with video production companies that don't have the time to tell their own story, I can come in and do it like this. And here's a result of, 2 other video companies that I've helped and how they're seeing, the success of. It's like, oh, you do that? That's your specialty? It's like, you're singing my song. That doesn't even make any sense, but sing me a song.
But then, and on that, like the other thing you can think about when making that first cold email is that cold email doesn't have to be the email where you pitch yourself. That cold email could just be an email to get the conversation started, to get your name familiar in that person's inbox. So my coach, Matthew Kimberly, he says, if you wanted to get a conversation started with Richard Branson, you might say something like, oh, read your book, great book, inspired me to launch my own airline. By the way, like, where do you get airline fuel from? Just like the idea is that like you start with a compliment, you show them that this is not a generic email you've blasted out to a million people, and you ask a question that is very quick for them to reply.
Yep.
It's not like you don't ask a question. Like I get this all the time in my DMs. Like, what was the number one business lesson? I'm like, oh my gosh, like
how much time do I got here?
I don't know. I'll go listen to a couple of podcasts where I share a lot of business lessons. But if they tell me like, oh, so cool, like I listened to your podcast, you briefly mentioned, how like you email people every day, like who's your email provider? I'm like, oh, okay, well, I use Gmail, But now I've replied to them. I have a conversation thread. Maybe they reply like, gee, thanks. Like, thank you so much for replying. I never thought, and that could start slowly. And maybe a month from now, they'll do a pitch, but I'll open it and it'll be a little bit warmer because I've already spoken to them about something else.